I'm Alexa Carter, 30, and I spent 5 years building my healthcare tech company in silence, while my family thought I was just wasting my potential. Tonight at my brother's engagement dinner, his fiancée looked at me and whispered, "Wait, you're the founder of Metalink." The look on my parents' faces when they realized the app her company was acquiring for hundreds of millions was mine, was worth every Sunday dinner where they told me to get a real job. My brother's jaw is still on the floor. If you're watching this from a place where your dreams are dismissed, hit like and subscribe. Let me tell you how it happened. They said I was wasting my youth on lines of useless code while I was quietly building a dream they could never understand. Growing up in Pasadena meant living under the constant shadow of what everyone else wanted me to be. My dad, Dr. David Carter, wasn't just a neurosurgeon. He was the guy other surgeons called when things went wrong in the operating room. My mom, Susan, ran her own law firm, never losing a case, never letting me forget it either. Then there was Ryan, my older brother, the golden child, the doctor in residency, the pride of every family gathering. I was supposed to follow the plan. Harvard Law. A clerkship. A future that looked good on Christmas cards. Instead, I dropped out after a year and enrolled in computer science at Cal State Fullerton, trading courtrooms for code, leaving my parents in a state of permanent disappointment. They called it a phase. I called it freedom. At 28, I moved into a tiny studio in Glendale, living off ramen and discount coffee while teaching myself full-stack development late into the night. They thought I was broke, drifting. In reality, I was quietly building Metalink, a healthcare data platform designed to connect small clinics and hospitals that couldn't afford the bloated systems big hospitals used. I poured everything into it, every hour, every dollar, every heartbeat. But they didn't know that. They didn't want to know. Sunday dinners were like performance reviews I never asked for. We gathered around the polished oak table, my dad carving prime rib, my mom adjusting the linen napkins, Ryan sharing updates about his rotations and the new research project he was leading. They listened, engaged, praising every word he spoke. Then came my turn. "So, Alexa," my mom would say, her smile polite but thin, "any progress on getting a real job yet?" She said it like it was casual, like it wasn't a knife she twisted each time. "I'm working on some projects," I'd reply, keeping my voice, even my fork, steady. My dad would clear his throat. "Computer games again." "It's not games, Dad," I would say, staring at the mashed potatoes on my plate. "It's software." Ryan would jump in, trying to smooth things over with a laugh. "Come on, Lex, maybe Emily can help you find something at her company. She's got connections at Medbridge." Medbridge. The healthcare giant. The irony was almost too much to swallow. Emily, Ryan's fiancée, was everything they wanted in a future daughter-in-law. Polished, ambitious, climbing the ladder as director of strategic investments at Medbridge. The last dinner she had leaned over and said, "You know there are always entry-level IT jobs open, Alexa." She meant well. They all did. It didn't make it easier to stomach. I kept my head down, refusing to let the anger show. Instead, I would help clean the dishes, load the dishwasher, say goodbye with a polite smile, and drive back to my studio where Metalink was waiting for me on my aging laptop, where I could be someone I actually recognized. That night, after another Sunday dinner of being the family disappointment, I drove home in silence, the lights of Pasadena blurring through my windshield. I parked, climbed the stairs, and opened my laptop, checking on the server logs. Metalink was up, stable, gaining users steadily. My phone buzzed. A message from Emily. "Great seeing you at dinner. Looking forward to the engagement party. By the way, what do you do exactly?" I tossed my keys on the counter and leaned against the cold kitchen sink, letting the quiet wrap around me like a heavy blanket. The soft hum of the fridge was the only sound, a reminder that I was alone, but at least here no one was measuring my worth against a checklist I never wanted. I replayed the dinner in my mind, every forced smile, every sideways glance when I said I was still working on my projects. My mom's eyebrow twitching, her eyes flicking to my dad as if to say, "Here she goes again." My dad sighed deep and tired, the kind that says he's given up on expecting better. I opened the fridge, pulled out the leftover takeout, and ate, standing up, staring at the blank wall in front of me. The taste was bland, but it filled the silence in a way words couldn't. When I finished, I wiped my hands and moved to my small desk by the window, flipping open my laptop. The screen glowed to life, illuminating the sticky notes crowded around the frame, reminders of feature updates, bug reports, client emails. Metalink was there, alive, growing, even if no one else saw it. I checked the new user registrations for the day. 27. Small but steady. A small clinic in Sacramento had signed up, sending a brief thank you email about how Metalink made their patient records easier to manage. I read it twice, letting it soak in, a quiet victory in a world that only seemed to care about degrees and titles. My phone buzzed again, this time a group chat from Ryan with a photo of him and Emily at some hospital event, smiling, holding glasses of wine, another milestone in his perfect life. Another text from Mom followed. "We are so proud of Ryan. He's making a real difference." I wanted to type back to tell her that I was making a difference too, that people I'd never met were using something I built to help their patients, to save time, to save lives. But I didn't. Instead, I turned off the phone and closed my eyes, taking a deep breath, grounding myself. I thought about the nights I spent debugging code until the sunrise washed over the cracked blinds. The months Isabella and I skipped dinners eating ramen while we argued over server costs and UI design, the quiet moments of fear when a payment didn't come through and we didn't know if we could pay our rent. They would never see those moments. They didn't want to. I opened my eyes and started typing, reviewing the lines of code that had become my lifeline, fixing a minor issue a user had flagged that morning. Each keystroke felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, reminding me that this wasn't about them. It was about me. And that was enough. I remember one night when the heater in my studio stopped working. It was January and Pasadena was cold enough to seep into your bones at 2 a.m. I wrapped myself in 2 hoodies, typing with cold fingers while I watched the server logs on Metalink, praying the patch I pushed would hold. Isabella texted me, "Are you awake? I need you to check the payment API." I called her right back, hearing the tension in her voice. She was in her tiny apartment in Echo Park, the sound of her cat meowing in the background. "They're threatening to pull the contract," she said, her voice shaking. "We're not going to lose them," I told her, forcing my voice to stay calm. I stayed up all night fixing the payment system while Isabella handled the client call the next morning. When I finally closed my laptop, the sun was rising and I fell asleep at my desk, dreaming of code and invoices and the fear of losing everything we had built. No one saw that part. They didn't see the day Isabella's car was towed because we spent our last $1,000 on renewing Metalink's server license instead of paying her parking tickets. They didn't see me crying in the bathroom after a call with a potential investor who told us, 2 women founders in healthcare tech, good luck getting serious funding. We didn't stop. We couldn't. Isabella and I learned to live on coffee and hope. We took on small freelance coding jobs, building websites for local shops and small law offices just to cover our rent. Every dollar we made went back into Metalink. Every moment of rest was earned, not given. And still, every Sunday I showed up for dinner at my parents' house, letting them believe I was aimlessly drifting, too stubborn to get a real job, too lost to see how much I was disappointing them. They would never understand how alive I felt when Isabella and I landed our first contract with a small clinic in Fresno, how the doctor's email thanking us for making his patient tracking easier made every sleepless night worth it. They didn't know I was in negotiations with a patent attorney when another company threatened us over a feature they claimed was theirs. I spent 2 weeks learning everything I could about IP law, reading late into the night, preparing for a call that could determine if we survived or closed down. That call ended with them backing off. It was the first time I felt powerful in a room full of men who thought I didn't belong. Sometimes I would walk down the street in Pasadena, watching people getting coffee, shopping, living normal lives, and I would wonder what it would be like to not carry the weight of something so fragile and so important. Then I would remember the clinics using Metalink, the patients who would never know my name but would get better care because of what we built, and I would keep going. On the nights I thought about quitting, I would open my email and read the thank you notes we got from doctors, nurses, and patients. I would remind myself why I started, why it mattered, even if my family never saw it. I was in the middle of reviewing a new user interface design when my phone buzzed again. It was a text from Emily. "Great seeing you at dinner. Looking forward to the engagement party. By the way, what do you do exactly?" I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. What would I even say? That I built a healthcare platform being used by clinics across California? That I was in talks with investors who actually believed in what we were doing? That I was fighting every day to prove that two women could. I lead in healthcare tech. I locked my phone and set it face down on the table. I wasn't ready to answer her. Not yet. Because deep down I knew the moment I did nothing would be the same. What would you have done if you were me? Have you ever been in a situation like this? Share in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. You think a female tech founder drives a Tesla and sips Starbucks every morning? I ate ramen in a cramped studio apartment in Glendale, hoping the landlord wouldn't notice the rent was late again. The nights were the hardest when the world quieted down and doubts got loud. I would sit cross-legged on my bed, laptop propped up, the glow of the screen lighting the dark. The cursor blinked while I stared at lines of code that refused to cooperate. Isabella would text me at midnight. "You alive?" Barely I'd type back. She'd reply with a selfie, her curly hair tied up, dark circles under her eyes, a Red Bull in her hand. We were 29 and 28, running on caffeine and stubbornness, betting everything on Metalink. I remember the day we pawned Isabella's car to pay our developer Alex, who threatened to walk if we couldn't send his check. We stood outside the pawn shop on Colorado Boulevard, the sun beating down, Isabella shaking as she handed over the keys. She didn't cry, but her voice cracked when she said, "This better work, Lex." "It will," I told her, even if I wasn't sure. We used the cash to make payroll, and that night Isabella and I sat on the floor of my studio eating cup noodles, our laptops balanced on cardboard boxes. We were fixing a critical bug before a live demo with a small clinic in Fresno the next morning. "If this crashes, we're done," Isabella whispered. "It won't," I said, fingers moving over the keys, heart pounding. We pushed the patch at 3 a.m., held our breath, and watched the server logs. No errors. The relief was so intense, I started laughing, tears rolling down my face. Isabella laughed too, wiping her eyes, her shoulders shaking. The next day the demo went smoothly and the clinic signed on. It was a tiny win, but to us it was everything. Metalink wasn't just an app. It was the chance to prove we weren't just two girls playing business. It was our shot at showing the world, and maybe ourselves, that we could build something that mattered. Then there was the day we got the cease and desist letter from a big tech company claiming we had infringed on their patent. My hands shook as I read the email, the letters swimming in front of me. Isabella came over, her face pale. "What do we do?" I swallowed hard. "We fight." I spent nights reading about intellectual property law, contacting lawyers who either ignored me or quoted fees we couldn't afford. I found a young attorney in Burbank who agreed to help us pro bono if we signed an NDA. We met in a cramped office that smelled like old coffee and printer ink, signing papers I didn't fully understand but had no choice but to trust. It took weeks, but the company backed off, realizing we weren't worth the legal battle. When we got the email saying the case was dropped, Isabella screamed so loud the neighbors banged on the wall. We celebrated with dollar tacos from a truck on Sunset Boulevard, sitting on the curb laughing like we were invincible. Meanwhile, my mother kept sending me emails with the subject line, "Thought of you." Inside were links to job postings for legal assistants or IT help desk positions, followed by lines like, "This would be a great stepping stone for you, honey." My dad called one evening, his voice calm, careful. "Alexa, why don't you come work for Ryan's practice? He could use help with admin tasks. You can get some experience until you figure things out." I bit my lip, looking at the sticky notes on my wall with user growth numbers and bug reports. "I'm okay, Dad," I said softly. There was silence on the line before he sighed. "We just want to see you do something real." I hung up, my hands shaking, and opened Metalink's dashboard. We had hit 10,000 active users that day, up from the 100 we started with a year ago. They didn't know. They didn't want to know. But I knew. And that had to be enough. I closed my laptop that night and leaned back, the numbers still glowing in my mind. 10,000 users. 10,000 people using something Isabella and I built in a dusty studio apartment powered by gas station coffee and pure stubbornness. I stood up, stretching my arms, hearing the pop in my shoulders from hours hunched over code. I walked to the tiny window that overlooked the streetlights of Glendale cars, passing people heading home from late shifts from lives that didn't require them to prove themselves every single day. My phone buzzed. It was Isabella calling on FaceTime. Her hair was in a messy bun, and I could see her cat sleeping behind her on the couch. "You see the numbers?" she asked, grinning. "I saw," I said, letting a small smile break through. "We did that," she said, pointing at me through the screen. "Us. No investors, no rich uncles, just us." I nodded, feeling the heaviness in my chest ease for a moment. "Yeah, just us." She grew quiet, chewing on her lip. "You think your parents would be proud if they knew?" I paused, looking away. "They wouldn't understand." She sighed. "Screw that, we're building something real." We ended the call and I collapsed onto my bed, too tired to pull the blankets over me, letting the weight of everything press down and keep me still. I drifted off, dreaming of server logs and user signups and the fear of losing what we built. The next morning, I woke up to an email from my mom. The subject line read, "Have you thought about this?" It was a link to a job posting for a receptionist position at a small law office in Pasadena. Underneath, she wrote, "You need stability, honey." I closed the email without replying, my jaw tight, my eyes burning. I opened Medlink's dashboard, instead scanning the user metrics, support tickets, new signups from clinics in San Diego and Modesto. Stability, I thought, was not what I needed. This was what I needed. I spent the day working through bug reports and feature requests, Isabella texting me updates from a meeting she had with a clinic that wanted to upgrade to our premium package. We were still scraping by every dollar going back into server costs and small paychecks to our developer Alex, who was patient but made it clear he couldn't wait forever for better pay. That night, while eating cold leftovers, I thought about the lawsuit thread again. About how close we came to losing it all, how I almost called my dad to say I would take that admin job with Ryan just to escape the fear. I didn't call. Instead, I called our lawyer, sat in a dusty office signing papers I couldn't afford, and chose to fight. I chose this. My phone dinged with a new email. I almost ignored it, thinking it was another support ticket, but the sender caught my eye. Emily Turner, Medbridge. The subject line, "Potential Acquisition Opportunity." I froze, reading the words over and over, my heart thudding in my chest. I opened it, scanning the brief message. "Hi Alexa, I hope this email finds you well. We have been following Medlink's growth with interest and would like to discuss a potential acquisition opportunity at your earliest convenience. Best, Emily Turner, Director of Strategic Investments, Medbridge." I sank down into the chair, staring at the screen, the world suddenly too quiet, too still. Emily. Ryan's fiancée. My parents' perfect future daughter-in-law. She wanted to buy my company. I let out a shaky breath, leaning back, the glow of the screen reflecting off the tears I didn't even realize had started to fall. Have you ever been in a situation like this? Share in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. I used to think one word of approval from my parents would make me happy. I was wrong. The morning after Emily's email, I sat across from Isabella in our co-working space in downtown LA, the hum of startup founders and clacking keyboards around us. Isabella's dark eyes were wide, her curls pulled back as she sipped her iced coffee. "They want to buy us, Lex," she said, her voice half whisper, half shout. I tapped the email on my laptop, reading Emily's words again. Potential acquisition opportunity. I should have felt excited. I felt like I couldn't breathe. "They want to buy Medlink," I corrected her. Isabella set her cup down. "Same thing. This is it. This is what we worked for." I shook my head, staring at the user dashboard still open behind the email. "We worked to build something that mattered, Isa. I'm not ready to give that up." Her voice softened. "We wouldn't be giving it up. We'd be scaling it. Think of the clinics we could reach, the patients we could help." I closed my eyes, pressing my fingers to my temple, the tension sharp. I don't want to lose what we've built." "We won't," she said, reaching across the table. "We'll fight for our vision." That afternoon, we called in a lawyer, a young guy named Jeremy. We met through another founder who had helped negotiate early-stage exits. We sat in a tiny glass conference room, Jeremy explaining due diligence, earnouts, and valuation caps while scribbling numbers on a whiteboard. Medbridge will push for control, Jeremy warned, tapping the marker against his palm. You need to decide what's non-negotiable. Isabella looked at me, her eyes steady. What's non-negotiable for you, Lex? I swallowed. I need to keep leading Metalink. I need it to stay ours. Jeremy nodded, but I could see the caution in his eyes. The next few days were a blur of calls, paperwork, and strategy sessions. At night, I would crawl into bed exhausted, staring at the cracked ceiling of my studio, wondering if I was making the right decision. Meanwhile, the family group chat pinged constantly with photos of Ryan and Emily in front of the new house they were buying in Pasadena. Emily's smile flawless in every shot. My mom would add captions like, "So proud of these two," followed by, "Alexa, have you thought more about that IT help desk position? Emily said she could pass your resume along." I would stare at those messages, the words blurring, the irony too loud to ignore. My thumb would hover over the keyboard, ready to type, ready to tell them about the emails, the meetings, the negotiations with the healthcare giant that wanted to buy the company they thought was just a phase. I didn't send anything. Late one Friday, I left the office early and drove across town to a community center in Boyle Heights. I volunteered there every other week, teaching a small coding club for teenage girls who didn't have laptops at home but wanted to learn. That day, Mia, a 15-year-old with bright eyes and a stubborn streak I recognized in myself, pulled me aside. "Miss Alexa, can I ask you something?" she said, clutching her notebook to her chest. "Of course," I said, kneeling to her eye level. "Why don't you tell your family what you do?" she asked, her voice quiet. "My brother says if I learn coding, people will think I'm weird. But you're not weird. You're brave." I felt my throat tighten, the noise of the room fading. "Sometimes," I said slowly, "staying quiet feels safer." She frowned. "But don't you want them to be proud of you?" I paused, looking at her. "I used to think I did." Her eyes searched mine before she nodded, turning back to her laptop, typing with fierce determination. I stood there watching her, wondering when I had stopped believing I could be seen without fear. Driving home that night, I turned my phone back on. There was a new email from Jeremy, the subject line making my heart pound. "Call me now. It's about Emily Turner." I pulled over in a grocery store parking lot, the glow from the streetlights making the inside of my car feel like a small, quiet stage. I called Jeremy, my thumb trembling as I hit the dial. He picked up on the first ring. "Alexa, we need to talk," he said, voice low but urgent. I gripped the steering wheel. "What's going on?" "It's Emily Turner," he said. "She's the director of strategic investments at Medbridge. She's the one leading your acquisition deal." The words hit me like cold water. I blinked, trying to process my mind, pulling up every group text photo, every dinner, every polite smile she gave me across my parents' table. My brother's fiancée. The perfect daughter-in-law. The one my mother called a true success. The same woman trying to buy my company. I let out a shaky breath. "Are you sure?" "Yes," Jeremy said. I double-checked before calling. "She's the lead on the file." "I don't think she knows you're the founder." I closed my eyes, the reality sinking in like a slow burn. Emily, who offered to help me get an entry-level IT job, was sitting in meetings planning to acquire the company she didn't even know I built. "Lex, this complicates things." Jeremy continued carefully. "If this leaks, it could get messy. Family dinners, engagement parties. This could be a conflict." I opened my eyes, staring at the dashboard lights. "Does she know?" "I don't think so," he said. "But she will. Soon." I sat there, the hum of cars pulling in and out around me, the world moving while mine stood still. I thought about Mia's question, the way she looked at me with hope, the way I couldn't give her an honest answer. Maybe it was time I stopped hiding. When I got back to my studio, the air was heavy, smelling like cold takeout and stale coffee. I dropped my keys on the counter and opened my laptop, the screen lighting up the dark room. I pulled up Metalink's dashboard, watching the live activity map as small clinics across California logged in updated patient files, checked lab results. Lives moving forward because of something Isabella and I built. My phone buzzed with a family group chat notification. Mom, Emily just got a huge recognition at Medbridge. "So proud of her. Alexa, did you email her about that IT position?" I stared at the message, a laugh slipping out, bitter and sharp. Emily didn't just have a recognition. She was recognized for trying to buy my company. The phone buzzed again. Emily says she can help you prep your resume if you want. I typed out a reply, fingers flying over the screen. Thanks. I'll handle it. I deleted it. Instead, I put the phone face down and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights stretching across Los Angeles. I saw reflections of all the times I stayed silent, let them believe I was lost, let them measure me against their idea of success. It was almost funny. Almost. I turned back to my laptop, opening the email from Emily I had left unread. Hi Alexa, looking forward to discussing next steps for MetaLink. Let me know when you're available to talk. Best, Emily. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Hi Emily, I'm available to meet this week. I hit send. My heart pounded in my chest as I closed the laptop, knowing there was no going back now. What would you have done if you were me? Have you ever been in a situation like this? Share in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. They say every secret eventually comes out, but I didn't expect mine to surface in the middle of a fancy restaurant in front of the entire family. I parked my old Honda 2 blocks away from the Palm in Beverly Hills, afraid the valet would judge the faded paint and missing hubcap. The engine clicked as it cooled, echoing in the dark as I checked my reflection in the side mirror. The black dress I wore was simple fitted but not flashy, paired with a thrifted clutch and the only pair of heels I owned. My hair was pinned back neatly and I wore a single layer of lipstick, just enough to look alive. I walked toward the glowing entrance of the Palm, the smell of grilled steak and warm bread greeting me as the host led me through the crowded dining room to a private area in the back. Crystal chandeliers hung above a long table covered in white linen, surrounded by familiar faces. My mother was already fussing with place cards, her hair in a perfect French twist, her gold bracelet catching the light as she turned. She looked me up and down, her eyes pausing on my dress. You look nice, Alexa, she said, but the pause before the compliment made it feel like a correction. Thanks, Mom, I replied, forcing a smile. Ryan appeared behind her, grinning, holding a glass of champagne. Lex, you made it, he said, pulling me into a quick hug that smelled like expensive cologne. Wouldn't miss it, I said, stepping back as he moved to greet another guest. I took a seat near the middle of the table, tucking my bag under my chair, trying to ignore the tension in my shoulders. My mother sat across from me, leaning in. You know, Emily has so many connections at Apple, she said, her voice low but excited. We could get your resume to the right people. I took a sip of water, letting the cold calm me. Mom, I'm fine where I am. She sighed, glancing at Ryan, who was now laughing with a cousin near the bar. We just want you to have stability, Alexa. I didn't answer. I watched the candles flicker as people settled into their seats, the sound of silverware and low conversation filling the air. Then Emily walked in. She wore a deep blue dress, her dark hair falling in perfect waves around her shoulders, her smile warm as she greeted each family member with hugs and soft words. She moved with the confidence of someone who belonged everywhere. When she saw me, her smile faltered for half a second before she recovered, stepping forward. Alexa, it's so good to see you, she said, leaning in to air kiss my cheek. You too, Emily, I replied, holding her gaze. She moved to sit beside Ryan, taking his hand under the table as she looked around the room, thanking everyone for coming. She fit perfectly, the daughter-in-law my parents had dreamed of. The server began pouring wine, plates of appetizers appearing, and conversations picked up around the table. An uncle leaned toward me, a smirk on his face. So, Alexa, have you thought about letting Emily help you get that job at Apple? He asked, loud enough for others to hear. A few polite laughs followed, and my mother smiled tightly. I swallowed, setting my glass down carefully. I'm good, thank you. Emily was mid-bite, her fork pausing as she glanced at me, her brows knitting together. There was a moment, a flicker of something in her eyes before she set her fork down, her gaze locked on me. Wait, she said, her voice cutting through the table's chatter. Alexa Carter, she continued slowly, her eyes narrowing. MetaLink, right? The table fell silent. I could hear the clink of a fork hitting a plate somewhere down the table, the soft hum of conversation around us in the restaurant fading into a distant buzz. Ryan turned toward Emily, his brow furrowing. What are you talking about, Em? Emily didn't look at him. She kept her eyes locked on me, her expression shifting from confusion to realization to something like shock. Alexa Carter, she repeated, her voice steady but low. You're the founder of Metalink. I felt every pair of eyes at the table turn toward me. My mother's lips parted, the color draining from her face. My father leaned back in his chair, his glass of wine paused halfway to his mouth. I swallowed, feeling the tightness in my chest, the weight of every dinner, every remark about getting a real job pressing down on me. Yes, I said, my voice calm even. I am. Emily leaned back slightly, her eyes scanning my face like she was seeing me for the first time. The Metalink we've been negotiating to acquire, she said almost to herself. Ryan's head snapped back to me, confusion and disbelief all over his face. Wait, what? You're the Alexa from those calls you're always taking. Emily nodded slowly, her fingers tapping against her wine glass. She's the one. The founder. The one they called the silent lead. The reason the deal is so important. Silence pressed in again, heavy and sharp. My uncle cleared his throat. Hold on, you're telling us Alexa's company is the one worth. What was it, millions? Emily's eyes didn't leave mine. Hundreds of millions. I could see my mother's hand trembling as she set her glass down, her eyes wide, searching my face for something to hold on to. My father's jaw clenched, his knuckles white around the stem of his glass. Ryan let out a breath, shaking his head, a small, incredulous laugh escaping. You're telling me you've been sitting at these dinners letting us think you were? His words trailed off, the disbelief turning into something else, something closer to respect, but he couldn't quite say it. I took a slow breath, my heart pounding in my ears, but my voice stayed calm. I wasn't hiding, I said softly. I was building. The server appeared, awkwardly setting down the next course, his eyes darting around the table before he slipped away. No one moved to touch their plates. Emily finally leaned back, exhaling a small, almost amused smile on her lips. Damn, she whispered, shaking her head. Ryan looked at me, then back at Emily. You knew about this. She's the reason the board is so excited about the deal, Emily said, still looking at me. I just didn't know it was you. My mother opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. Alexa, why didn't you tell us? I met her eyes, the years of quiet dismissal, of small smiles that didn't reach her eyes, of lectures about stability and respectability flashing between us in that moment. Because you never wanted to know, I said. The words hung there suspended in the heavy air as the candles flickered and the restaurant sounds slowly returned around us. Have you ever had a moment where your truth finally came out, whether you were ready or not? What would you have done if you were me? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. Some sentences, just 4 words, can turn a buzzing dinner into complete silence. Emily stood up, her chair scraping lightly against the polished floor, her eyes still locked on mine. You're the founder, she said, her voice clear, each word slicing through the quiet like a bell. The room froze. My uncle's fork hovered midair. A cousin's laugh died in her throat. My mother's hand clutched her napkin so tightly I thought it might tear. Ryan's mouth opened, then closed, his eyes darting between Emily and me as if searching for a logical explanation. Emily took a slow breath, her eyes narrowing as realization settled across her features. She shook her head slightly, almost in disbelief, then let out a short, incredulous laugh. Alexa, she said, her voice softer. Now you're the CEO and founder of Metalink. The Metalink that MedBridge is about to acquire for $250 million. I felt the weight of every pair of eyes land on me, pressing against my skin, waiting, questioning, judging, shifting. I didn't flinch. I didn't need to shout or justify or explain. I simply nodded once my face calmed, my shoulders back. Yes, I said. That's me. A gasp somewhere near the end of the table. The clink of a glass being set down. The low, shaky breath of my mother as she blinked, trying to form words. Emily let out a breath, her lips curving into a smile that held genuine admiration. I can't believe it, she said. You built the platform that saved the hospital's data systems after that ransomware attack last year. The same system that's cut patient wait times, improved data security. That's your work. I nodded again, letting her words fill the space my family never let me claim before. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, his voice rough when he finally spoke. Lex, why didn't you tell us? I looked at him, the brother who I once thought I had to measure up to, who never truly saw me. I tried, I said, quietly. You just didn't want to hear it. A cousin whispered, she's a millionaire, and someone else shushed her, but the words echoed, shifting the air around the table. I saw the moment my mother's face changed, the shock bleeding into something else, something like pride she didn't know how to express. My father cleared his throat, his hand trembling as he set down his wine glass. Alexa, he started, his voice cracking, we didn't know. I met his eyes, steady and calm. I know. Emily's eyes sparkled with a mix of professional curiosity and personal shock. We've been negotiating with your legal team for weeks, Alexa. I had no idea it was you. I allowed a small smile to touch my lips. I preferred to keep it that way. Across the table, my aunt leaned in, a fake laugh in her voice. Well, Alexa, since you're doing so well, maybe you'd like to look at a small investment opportunity for my son's startup. I looked at her, blinked once, and turned back to Emily, ignoring the request. Emily's eyes softened, and for a moment, we were just two women who had worked too hard for too long, finally seeing each other for who we were. The restaurant noise returned slowly, dishes clinking, the quiet murmur of other tables in the distance, but around ours, a stunned silence still clung to the air. I took a sip of water, feeling the cold slip down my throat, grounding me as my heart thundered in my chest, but my face remained calm. In that moment, surrounded by people who had spent years doubting me, I realized I didn't need them to see me. They finally saw me anyway. Emily sat down slowly, her eyes still on me, her mind clearly racing. Ryan kept looking between us, trying to process everything, his fork untouched on his plate. The rest of the table stayed quiet, their curiosity crackling in the air like static. A cousin coughed and someone cleared their throat, but no one spoke. My mother finally found her voice, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Alexa, why didn't you tell us you were working on something like this? I kept my gaze steady, my voice even. Because every time I tried to talk about coding, about what I was building, you told me to get serious. That it was a phase. She blinked, looking like she wanted to argue, but no words came. My father exhaled, his shoulders dropping, the weight of his expectations cracking in real time. We were wrong, he said, his voice rough. I see that now. Emily leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. Your platform saved entire hospital networks, Alexa. I was in meetings where CIOs said Metalink was the only reason they recovered patient data after ransomware attacks. I can't believe it was you. My heart squeezed, but I held my composure. That's why I built it. A server appeared to clear empty plates, hesitating as he felt the tension. We all sat in silence while he removed dishes and refilled glasses, the clinking of silverware sharp in the air. When he left, my aunt, the same one who used to ask me every Thanksgiving when I would get a real job, leaned forward with a bright false smile. Well, Alexa, now that you're so successful, maybe you can take a look at my son's business plan. He's looking for investors. I looked at her for a moment, then simply nodded without answering, turning back to Emily. Emily's eyes softened, her voice dropping to something more personal. You know, I wish I had known. It would have changed everything in those calls. I know, I said. But I wasn't ready. Ryan shook his head, letting out a small, disbelieving laugh. I can't believe my little sister is negotiating a deal for a company worth more than I'll probably make in my lifetime. I let out a breath. I didn't realize I was holding a small, genuine smile tugging at my lips. It's not about the money, Rye. He nodded, his eyes finally seeing me, really seeing me for the first time. Emily glanced around, the corners of her mouth lifting into a genuine smile. I think we need to talk, Alexa. About what you want from this deal. I nodded. We will. My mother wiped under her eyes, quickly forcing a smile that cracked at the edges. I'm proud of you, Alexa. I let the words sit there, letting them fall where they would, not rushing to respond. Dinner continued, the tension slowly lifting, replaced with a quiet curiosity that followed every glance sent my way. They asked questions, now real ones, about Metalink, about how it worked, about what it meant. I answered simply, directly, letting them see me, but not letting them take credit for what they never supported. After dessert, I stood excusing myself. I needed air. I stepped out onto the patio, the chill of the Beverly Hills night wrapping around me as I pulled in a breath that felt like the first clean one in years. The lights of the city glowed beyond the glass railing, the sounds of laughter and music floating from the restaurant behind me. I felt tears slip down my cheeks, not from hurt but from the weight finally lifting from the freedom of standing in the truth without fear. I wiped them away, a small laugh escaping as I shook my head. Because for the first time I wasn't hiding. And for the first time they saw me. What would you have done if you were me? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. They stopped asking me when I'd get a real job. Now they asked if they could invest. The morning after the engagement dinner, my parents asked to meet me for brunch. I chose a quiet spot in Pasadena, a small cafe with brick walls and plants in mismatched pots, a place I had worked from many mornings while building Metalink. I arrived early, ordering coffee and watching the steam curl into the cold morning air. My mother and father arrived together, my mother holding her purse with both hands, my father looking like he hadn't slept. "Alexa," my mother said as she sat, her voice soft, careful. "Hi, Mom." "Dad," I said, nodding. We ordered quickly, the silence hanging between us as we waited, broken only by the clatter of plates and the hiss of the espresso machine behind the counter. My mother finally cleared her throat, her eyes glistening. "We owe you an apology." I looked at her, waiting. We didn't understand," she said, blinking quickly, trying to hold herself together. "We thought we were guiding you, protecting you." My father's hands were folded on the table, his knuckles pale. "You proved us wrong, Alexa." I let out a slow breath, the tension easing in my chest. "Thank you for saying that." My mother reached across the table, placing her hand over mine. "We're proud of you. Truly." I nodded, squeezing her hand gently before pulling mine back. She smiled, wiping under her eyes with a napkin. Then my father cleared his throat again. "Alexa, I was thinking, maybe I could help. Join Metalink's board, offers some of my experience." I paused, letting the words hang, feeling the weight of them. "Dad, I appreciate the offer," I said carefully, "but I think it's best if we keep work and family separate." His eyes flickered a flash of hurt, but he nodded slowly. "Of course. I respect that." We finished brunch with light conversation, them asking about Metalink, how many employees we had, how the platform actually worked. They listened this time, truly listened, and I let them in just a little. When we stood to leave, my mother hugged me tightly, whispering, "We love you, Alexa." "I know," I said, holding her back for a moment before stepping away. That evening I heard a knock on my apartment door. When I opened it, Ryan stood there with a bottle of wine in his hand, a sheepish smile on his face. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside, letting him in, the smell of takeout boxes filling the air as he looked around my small space. He set the bottle down, turning to me. "I owe you an apology too." I raised an eyebrow, crossing my arms. "Oh," he let out a breath, rubbing the back of his neck. "I've spent so much of my life trying to be the perfect son, the perfect example, that I didn't realize you were doing the same in your own way." I didn't see it. I softened, uncrossing my arms. "It's okay, Ryan." He shook his head, his eyes meeting mine. "No, it's not. You're the best big sister I could have ever asked for, Lex. And I'm proud of you." The words caught me off guard, a warmth spreading in my chest. "Thank you, Ryan." He pulled me into a hug, the first real one in years, and I let myself lean into it. Later that night, as I sat on my couch, my phone buzzed with a message. "Emily, we need to discuss the deal, but don't worry, I'm on your side." I looked at the message, a small smile pulling at the corners of my mouth. I typed back, "We'll talk tomorrow." I set the phone down, leaning back, letting the quiet of the apartment settle around me. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for their approval. And for the first time, I didn't need it. The next morning, I woke up before the sun, the Los Angeles sky still a deep gray outside my window. I made coffee and sat at my small kitchen table, the steam rising as I scrolled through emails. Isabella had sent a message at 2 a.m. "Call me when you're up." Big news. I called her and she answered on the first ring, her voice groggy but excited. "Lex, you need to check your email," she said. "I'm looking," I replied, scanning the unread messages until I saw it. Subject line, "Final offer, MedBridge acquisition." My heart thumped as I clicked it open, my eyes skimming the lines. Isabella was quiet on the other end, letting me read. The offer was clear. $250 million. Full acquisition, but with a clause allowing Isabella and me to retain executive roles and control over product direction. I leaned back, letting the numbers sink in, letting the years of struggle, late nights, and quiet victories flicker through my mind. "They're giving us everything we asked for," Isabella said, her voice cracking with disbelief. I closed my eyes for a moment, grounding myself. "Yeah," I whispered, "they are. For years we built Metalink on hope, on credit cards, on ramen dinners, while the world thought we were wasting our lives. Now the world wanted in. We need to go over it with Jeremy," I said, sitting up straighter, my mind already shifting into work mode. "I'll call him," Isabella replied, her voice steadier now. "Lex. We did it." I smiled, tears stinging at the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them back. "Yeah, Isa, we did." After we hung up, I sat there, my coffee cold, the email still open, the weight of what it meant pressing on my chest. It wasn't just about the money. It was the validation we no longer needed but had earned anyway. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily. "Congrats, Alexa. Let's talk soon." I stared at her message, thinking of her standing across the table at the Palm, realizing who I was and what I had built. I typed back, "Tomorrow works. Let me know a time." Setting the phone down, I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city, waking up, the sky lightening, the promise of a new day unfolding. I realized in that quiet moment that I didn't need their approval anymore. My parents, Ryan, the family, they could be proud, they could support me now, but it didn't define me. Success wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving to myself that I was always right to believe in what I could build. I turned back to my laptop, pulling up the Metalink dashboard, watching as clinics logged in from Fresno, Sacramento, and San Diego. Lives were being helped, patients were being seen, data was being protected. And it started in a tiny Glendale apartment with two women who refused to give up. As I took a breath, my phone buzzed again. A new email from Jeremy. "Lex, let's meet today to finalize signatures." This is real. I stared at the screen, my hand steady, my heart calm. This was real. And it was just the beginning. What would you have done if you were me? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. They used to laugh when I said technology could save lives. Now they pay to use that technology. 2 months after signing the deal, Metalink officially launched across the entire MedBridge system. I stood in the back of a conference room in San Diego, watching as hospital staff were trained on our platform, their eyes lighting up when they realized how fast they could access patient charts, lab results, medication lists. One nurse looked up, her smile tired but genuine. "This is going to save us so much time," she said. "Thank you." I nodded, a lump forming in my throat, but I stayed quiet, letting her return to her training session. Data started rolling in within weeks. Medication errors down by 45%. Patient satisfaction scores up by 40%. Nurses spending less time chasing down paper charts and more time with patients. I got an email from Emily with a photo attached. It was a group of nurses standing in front of a whiteboard that read, "Thank you, Metalink." One of them was holding a small sign that said, "This helps us help them." I sat at my desk staring at the photo, letting it sink in. All those nights alone with my laptop. All those times I was told to get a real job. All the moments I doubted myself. They led to this. A few days later, my dad called. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to it that night while sitting on the floor of my new apartment, the city lights glowing through the window. "Alexa, I saw Metalink at the hospital today. Your name wasn't on it, but I knew it was you. I just wanted you to know I see what you've done. I'm proud of you." His voice cracked on the last words, and for a moment I pressed the phone to my chest, letting the silence fill the room. That weekend, I drove to a community college in East LA to watch Mia compete in the state coding competition. She stood at the front of the room, her laptop open, her hands steady as she explained her app to the judges. Afterward, when they announced her as the winner, she ran to me, throwing her arms around my waist. "I did it," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "You did," I whispered back, hugging her tighter. She pulled back, smiling wide. "Thank you for showing me I can do this. You did this, Mia," I told her. "You believed in yourself." That night, as I packed up my laptop, a man approached me in the parking lot. It took me a moment to place him. "Mister." Richard's the lawyer who once told me to shut down Metalink when we got that cease and desist letter back when I was scared and broke and too stubborn to quit. Alexa, he said, clearing his throat. My daughter wants to go into tech. She's got ideas, but she's young. I was wondering if you had any advice. I paused looking at him, remembering the fear in my stomach when he told me I was wasting my time. Tell her not to wait for permission, I said. Tell her to build. He nodded, his face tight, but there was respect in his eyes now. As I drove home that night, the city lights reflecting on my windshield, I felt a quiet peace. The kind that comes when you know you've stayed true to yourself even when no one else believed. I parked and walked up to my apartment, opening the sliding door to the balcony. The night was cool, the air clear, the city alive below me. I stood there breathing it in, the lights stretching out toward the ocean, a reminder of how big the world was and how small fear could feel if you let it. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. An unknown number was calling. I hesitated for a second, watching the unknown number glow on my screen while the city hummed below me. Then I answered. Hello, I said, my voice calm. A man's voice came through, clear but cautious. Alexa Carter, yes, this is she. This is Dr. Samuel Lee, CEO of Memorial Pacific. I hope I'm not catching you too late. I blinked, leaning against the balcony railing. Memorial Pacific was one of the largest healthcare networks in California. No, it's fine, Dr. Lee, I said. How can I help you? He cleared his throat, the pause on the line heavy. I wanted to call you directly. We've been watching Metalink's rollout with MedBridge. Our board has been reviewing the results and, frankly, they're impressed. I swallowed, gripping the phone tighter. I appreciate that. We've seen the data. Error rates down, patient outcomes improving. My staff is already asking why we don't have it yet, he said, a small laugh in his voice. I let out a slow breath, a small smile forming. That's good to hear. We'd like to talk about bringing Metalink into Memorial Pacific, he continued. All facilities. Full integration. The weight of his words sank in the possibilities unfolding in my mind. This would mean expanding Metalink beyond what Isabella and I ever imagined in those ramen-fueled nights, into a system that would reach thousands of doctors, nurses, and millions of patients. That's a big move, Dr. Lee, I said, steadying my voice. I know, he replied. But your work is worth it. We're ready to make it happen if you are. I turned, looking back into my apartment, seeing the sticky notes on the wall, the screenshots of user dashboards, the framed photo of Isabella and me on launch day, both of us holding coffee, our smiles exhausted but real. I'd like to discuss it further, I said. Can we set up a meeting? Of course, he said, relief in his voice. I'll have my office send times tomorrow. Thank you, Alexa. We ended the call and I stood there, the cool air brushing against my skin, the city stretching out like a promise I could finally touch. I walked inside, sitting on the edge of my couch, letting the quiet settle around me. My phone buzzed again. A text from Isabella. How was your night on the balcony, CEO? I laughed softly, typing back. Big things coming. Call you in the morning. I set the phone down, leaning back, staring at the ceiling, letting the weight of it all press against me in the best way possible. We started Metalink because we believed healthcare could be better, that technology could save lives, that we didn't need permission to build something that mattered. Now, the people who once called it impossible were calling me, asking for a chance to be part of it. Justice doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it arrives quietly in the hands of those who once doubted you, who now have no choice but to acknowledge what you've built. My phone buzzed one last time before I turned it over, the screen lighting up the room. From Emily. We need to talk tomorrow. Something urgent. I stared at the message, my breath catching for a moment, a ripple of anticipation running through me. What would you have done if you were me? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. The day they finally saw me was the day I no longer needed them to. I was sitting in my office, the soft hum of the air conditioner and the quiet tapping of rain against the windows grounding me, when my phone rang. Alexa Carter, a bright, confident voice asked when I picked up. Yes, this is Alexa. This is Sarah Tran from Forbes Women. I'm reaching out because we're working on a feature about silent founders who have transformed industries without seeking the spotlight. I paused, blinking, letting her words sink in. Silent founders. Yes, she said, her voice warm. Your story came up again and again. Metalinks impact your leadership the way you built something revolutionary while keeping yourself out of the noise. We would love to feature you. I leaned back, the leather of my chair creaking softly. For years, I had hidden, letting Isabella take the interviews, letting the product speak while I stayed in the background. Now I realized I wasn't hiding anymore. I'd be honored, I said. We scheduled the interview for the next day. I spent the evening in my apartment, cooking a simple dinner, letting the quiet fill the space as I thought about what I wanted to say. Not for them. For me. The next morning, I met Sarah at a coffee shop near Culver City, a small place with brick walls and windows that let the soft morning light spill across the tables. She set up a small recorder, her smile encouraging as she clicked her pen. Ready when you are. I sipped my coffee, the warmth steadying me. Ask anything, I said. She started with the usual questions. When did you start Metalink? What challenges did you face? How did you feel when the acquisition came? I answered honestly, telling her about the ramen nights, the nights I fell asleep on my keyboard, the days I thought we would lose. Everything. I told her about the cease and desist letter, the fear, the choice to keep building anyway. I told her about my parents, the Sunday dinners where I was invisible, the endless questions about when I'd get a real job. Then she paused, looking at me carefully. Did you build Metalink to prove them wrong? I let out a breath, shaking my head, the truth clear in my mind. No, I said. I didn't build Metalink to prove them wrong. I built Metalink because I knew I was right. Sarah's eyes softened and she nodded. That's powerful, she said quietly. We wrapped up and she thanked me, promising to send a draft before it went live. I stepped outside, the Los Angeles air cool against my face, the world moving around me. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for approval, wasn't seeking validation. I had it. And it came from me. I walked down the sidewalk after the interview, the hum of the city steady around me, the smell of coffee and wet pavement grounding me as I processed what had just happened. My phone buzzed in my pocket and I pulled it out, seeing a text from Isabella. How did it go? I smiled, typing back. It felt right. Finally. She sent back a string of exclamation marks, and I could picture her in her apartment, pacing with excitement, her hair tied up, coffee in hand. I slipped my phone back into my pocket, walking toward the parking lot where I had left my car, each step feeling lighter than it had in years. Later that night, I reheated leftover soup in my small kitchen, the glow of the microwave the only light in the room. I carried the bowl to the couch, sitting cross-legged, letting the warmth of the food seep into my hands. The quiet was comfortable now. It wasn't loneliness. It was mine. I thought about everything Sarah had asked, every memory that had resurfaced as I answered. The nights Isabella and I fell asleep on the floor of the office, the calls with investors who didn't believe in us, the moments I wanted to give up but didn't. I thought about the nurses who used Metalink, the patients who didn't know my name but were safer because of what we built. I thought about Mia, who texted me last week telling me she started a coding club at her school. My phone buzzed again and I glanced at the screen. A photo from Mia holding a small trophy, her smile bright, the caption reading, "I did it, Miss Alexa. Thank you for believing in me." I set the phone down, pressing a hand to my chest, letting the emotion roll through me, warm and clean, not heavy like before. This was why. Not to prove them wrong. But because I knew even when no one else did that this mattered. That I mattered. I finished my soup and washed the bowl, the sound of the water steady, soothing. I wiped my hands on a towel and stepped out onto my small balcony, looking out at the lights of the city, breathing in the cool night air. I didn't need their recognition anymore. Because I had my own. I stayed out on the balcony until the air turned colder, the lights of downtown Los Angeles blinking softly beneath a clouded sky. I could hear the faint sounds of traffic, a siren in the distance, the quiet pulse of a city that never stopped moving. I checked my phone again, scrolling through the photos I had saved from the Metalink, launched the training sessions, the smiling nurses, the simple thank you notes that had filled my inbox. Each one reminded me that the quiet work mattered more than the noise I had once craved. I went back inside, locking the balcony door, and settled at my small desk, pulling out a notepad where I kept a list of ideas for Metalink's next phase. Improved patient dashboards. Integration with wearable devices. Language support for rural clinics. I wanted to build more not for recognition, but because the work felt like breathing. My phone buzzed on the table, breaking the quiet. It was an email from Sarah at Forbes. The subject line read, "Draft of your feature." I clicked it open, my eyes scanning the headline. Alexa Carter, the silent founder who revolutionized patient care. I read through the draft, the words pulling me back into moments I had nearly forgotten. The ramen dinners, the endless debugging, the fear when the bank account dropped below zero, the way I felt the first time a clinic emailed to say Metalink helped save a patient's life. When I reached the end, Sarah had written, Alexa Carter didn't build Metalink to prove anyone wrong. She built it because she believed patients deserve better, and because she knew she was capable of building it even when no one else did. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, closing my eyes for a moment. This was it. Not the magazine feature, not the recognition. The acceptance that I didn't need validation to know my worth. I hit reply, typing quickly. "Thank you, Sarah, it's perfect. Go ahead." I sent the email and leaned back, looking around my quiet apartment, the soft hum of the refrigerator in the background, the steady beat of my heart reminding me that I was still here, still building, still choosing this path every day. I reheated a cup of coffee and sat on the couch, pulling a blanket over my legs, watching the rain begin to fall against the window, streaks of water catching the glow of the streetlights. For dinner, I made a small plate of pasta, sitting alone at my kitchen table, the silence comforting, a soft reminder that I was at peace with where I was, with who I had become. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I didn't need them to tell me I had made it. Because I knew I had. As I cleaned up the dishes and wiped down the counter, my phone buzzed again, lighting up the dark kitchen. It was an email from Emily. Subject: ready. I opened it, my eyes scanning the short message. "Are you ready to help me change healthcare? Alexa." I stared at the screen, my breath catching a new warmth blooming in my chest. I set the phone down, looking out the window one more time, the rain tapping softly, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement. Have you ever been in a situation like this? Share your story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this.